greatly appreciate starting to see the power of what you've done. So we'll turn it over to Diane.
Yeah, we have the opportunity to share your work with schools around the world, because I work for the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and through that I work with schools that are trying to do more of the kind of work you're doing in your school. So delighted that you're willing to share your thoughts with us this morning and tell us about your project. So I think we ought to begin by having you just start to tell us what it is that you were working on during this project. This is a long unit that you work on, so you've had time to develop your project. Tell us about the project itself, your topic, what you're trying to accomplish in this project.
Right. So basically, like you said, like you mentioned, we've been working on some skills for filmmaking techniques before for a while. And we've been learning about like what kind of camera angles to use, what compositions are common. So we'd had a lot of sort of training for that. And then what the project itself is that we're put into groups with a director, a designer, an editor, and a screenwriter. And so we have to make a short, like 6 to 8 minute movie we get some like prompt to do this. So it was like a little piece of paper, a few images, but otherwise we're pretty free and we can do whatever we want. We have a few like small guidelines, but otherwise it's really up to us how we want to film it, when we want to film it. So yeah.
Can I ask you a question? What kinds of prompts were you given? Just can you give us a for instance?
Yeah, well, I mean, for each group of different prompts, I think they were mostly paintings or drawings. In my group, for example, we had this sort of painting of like a dark alley. We also had a woman sitting on a chair. We had this scene, a landscape where there was a crashed plane, and it's really up to us how much we want to stick to those prompts, or if we really just want to take a little bit of inspiration, or if we want to try and include them all.
Yeah, so the prompts were quite vague, like they weren't very, it was just a picture and you could interpret it in like 1,000 different ways. So.
Absolutely. And in terms of the topic, were you given free range on what topic you wanted to pursue in relation to those prompts?
Yeah, we were just given the stimulus and we were told to look at it, think of any story which could in any way relate, and from there it was completely free to us what we would like to do with it.
And so I know one of the guidelines was the 6 to 8 minutes. Can you give a couple of the other guidelines that you were given?
Well, of course, we had to, it was a pretty free project, so there weren't that many sort of restrictions. We also keep in mind that we're in the midst of a pandemic. We have to keep that in mind when filming. We can't reach social distancing rules. We have to sanitize most things and sort of keep it hygienic. Also, in addition, I personally feel that there weren't that many restrictions, but you also have to keep common sense in mind. You can't just wander off to another place when you're filming. You have to have supervision of some sort.
So we didn't get any like instructions for the project itself, but of course, since it's the first time most of us are doing anything like this, we did get like a short document, like 2 or 3 pages that said each of the roles and what you should be bringing to the group. But it wasn't like if you had a role assigned, you were only to do that. Like everybody, at least in our group, was like discussing all of the things together. So it wasn't definitely not like you were locked onto a role. So we did have some info for that.
And at one point we also sat together and we also came up with what we refer to as a team charter, where we each discussed each other's roles and responsibilities pertaining to the given roles and responsibilities. And we talked about what it means to be a team making a film, expectations we have, and what our goals were.
Each member of the guild was, depending on their role, if they were an editor, screenwriter, or director, everyone is assigned their own individual tasks as well. For example, if you're a director, you would have to produce a shooting schedule and a storyboard, or a screenwriter would have to make the script. So each role was given something that they would need to complete for the end of the project. However, the rest was, the filming was all for everyone, and everyone had to contribute just as much into that.
So this unit started with the hero's journey and Whale Rider.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, also sorry, go ahead.
Good. No, you go.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, it started really at the very beginning when we were in virtual school in January. Before we started talking about actually the content relating to filmmaking, we talked about media literacy, and it was really nice to have that lesson talking about media literacy and being able to approach media with a critical eye and the understanding, especially in today's world with social media and the internet. That lesson really gives an idea of also why we're doing this project, and everything that we're learning is really also helping us to be able to take a step back when we look at things and try and understand what is being conveyed. And
Yeah. So like it was like it wasn't the project wasn't just to learn filmmaking. It wasn't just to learn about the hero's journey. It wasn't just to learn about media literacy. It was like a combination of all of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
Great. Can you tell us about your specific project? What's it about? Your creative process.
I mean, like one by one, or
No, anybody.
Okay, who wants
I
to
can start with
okay.
screenwriter. So what the screenwriter does is essentially, just straight up, writes the script, of course, but it's also sort of more than that. The screenwriter needs to take in ideas from members of the group as to how they want their story to sort of be formed, but try to work their way around it to make it so that it's coherent, it makes sense. But also the screenwriter, the screenwriter and the director are usually the ones that implement their vision in the film, but at some point they're going to have to compromise, because even though the director does decide on most of the shots and how it is pretty much created, the screenwriter needs to focus on how it is told, in a way. What is the content within it? And the screenwriter also focuses on dialogue. They should have a good ear for how people speak, depending on the situation. And they should also have a sort of a good idea of how it looks like in their mind and sort of be able to convey that in words, even though the screenwriter shouldn't really be going into a deep monologue or soliloquy about how it should be filmed.
So wait, do you want to explain your project? Because I think that's what.
Oh, for the screenplay?
No, like how you are doing as your own.
Oh, of course. Oh, I thought you meant like the
Okay.
single project.
Oh, no. I mean, but what you just did, it was immensely helpful. So thank you for doing that. And then again, how that played out in your specific project.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, personally, I think our group, I'm in the same group as him. I think we work very well. I mean, we have a balance of respect for one another, and that really helps because everyone's a very good listener. We take ideas very well, and whenever we are in the heat of making a decision, we always take in at both sides of making the decision. Mm-hmm. And we personally, I feel that our group, we are able to get along very well, but it's not always the same for every group because it depends on how it depends on the person within the group usually. So yeah.
So you're partnering with her, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So can you describe your role and then a little more detail about the film that you produced?
Yeah. So my role is mostly to sort of have based off what the story is, which is for us based on a kid who wakes up from a coma in a dream, and things just don't feel right to him, and we try to convey as many sort of messages to the viewer that says things don't add up, but it also has this sort of meaning where it's this world that he does enjoy, although it may not be real. And my role in this was sort of to take the idea of the story and sort of convey it through the types of shots, the angles, and the focus that we're using to try and convey the message. For example, if we're choosing high angle shots, so maybe to show some vulnerability. Mm-hmm. As well as that, I was also in charge of sort of finding locations to film, mm-hmm. As well as trying to find times and overall just trying to create like when we can do things for the project.
So for me, I'm in a different group, and so is Margot. So for me, I'm also a director, so I had a similar role to Tushar, the same things, to use the story that my group had came up with. And about our story, it's a little bit, so our stimuli they were kind of, they gave a slightly sort of creepy feeling to them. I wouldn't say creepy, but it was
That's the dark alley one, right?
the way we discussed it was that it felt like things weren't right. It was the way, like, that's what our images look like. So our story that we ended up coming up with, it's like a slight horror, not really. It's like very kid-friendly horror. So what happens is that there's a new teacher in the school, so that's me, and then the teacher they're in this room and they find a diary that's been left there for some reason. So then they open the diary and it turns out it's from a student who was there like 40, 50 years ago. So then they discover this diary and they sort of trace back through the steps of the student, like based on what they're writing. They like one scene, the student was sort of, they lost a game of badminton or something, like around lungs of that. And they were writing under the bleachers because they were like a bit sad about it. And they got, their friends were saying how bad they were at badminton. So the teacher sort of traces back through the steps of the student and kind of follows along the journey. So I had to do the same thing as a two-short, and I came up with a filming schedule, what locations we were going to film, and decided on what like shots and angles to use.
And Mara, what role did you play in relation to that story?
So I'm the designer, and so I'm in a different group. And our story is based on, it's these two teenagers who are in a museum for a school project, and they find this this completely broken plane, and inside they find this box that belonged to a soldier. And although we're not exactly setting it in World War II specifically, we are being inspired by that sort of time period. And it goes back into a flashback, and we follow the story of the soldier. And then we go back into the present. And as a designer, so I'm not the only designer in my group. I have someone else, which is really nice because it allows me to rely on someone else. And we are in charge of costumes, makeups, props, and also acting and blocking and physicality. And at the beginning of the project, I did find it kind of stressful because it's a lot of things to think about. Because you have to think of all the costumes and all the props, and you have to have continuity as well. Because it's not always scene, you don't film it scene 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not in the same order, and there's a lot of things to bring to school. But throughout the project, I really think that by relying on each other with the other designer, we really managed to organize ourselves and to bring everything we needed. And yeah.
So the point that you're at with your film right now, can you describe that, where you are in the process?
So currently most of the groups are well underway with filming, and we all decided times to film. So everyone has a proper schedule ready, and also many have started on their own individual projects as a part of the thing. But for now, as to time management, things for most, as we got a slight extension for most groups, they're on track, and it looks like everyone's going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And can you give a little more clarity on what class you're doing this for? Is it one class? Is it multiple classes? Do you?
Yeah, English class.
But I mean, not only, I think also the skills that we're learning,
Yeah.
of course, it can be applied to all of our classes.
But you're doing it in an English class, so it's an English assignment, correct? And again, I understand that it has a lot of skills that are coming from outside, for example. So are you working in consultation with other staff members in relation to some of the applications? For example, the designer might need some help or facility from an art teacher or somebody in the community.
So we do have that option. It's not required at all. Like, I don't think anybody really in our group has gone to go ask for help, but if you need it, of course, I mean, you can ask mainly if you have a question, like our two English teachers, Ms. Landis and Mr. Benzenberg. But if you have a specific question, like you mentioned, to get some help from like an art teacher about design, then I don't see why not. You could go ask if that would be okay during English time, and you could certainly go and ask about that.
And is this happening mostly during your class time, or is this something that you're expected to do outside of school?
Well, it's really a choice depending on the group. My group, we went and filmed during the weekend because it was the shooting locations. We don't always have everything we need at school, but it's really like student led. We choose when and where we want to film. If we want to go out of school, or if we want to stay after school to film. If we want to do things on the weekends, or only film during class times.
Great. And is there going to be some formal celebration? Are you going to have a viewing party?
We're going to have a
Yes.
Is that the plan? Okay. Fantastic. So far, what is one of the things that you found to be incredibly difficult when you were working through your projects? Because I know we have 3 projects represented here, correct?
Yeah.
So what's the one thing that was tough for you? It still may be tough for you, so you're still working your way through it. Doesn't mean that you overcame the obstacle, but something that you had wrestled with or you're wrestling with now.
Well, for example, communication is something that's it's a big obstacle for many groups, because we have to keep in mind that we're not all professional filmmakers. We're just a bunch of 9th grade students, and sometimes it's hard for people to sort of not only communicate their ideas and get everyone on par with it, but also find a way to actually, like, for example, a couple of days ago, we had to do some of the work at home, and when we were doing it, we were trying to get in contact with the group members, but that's difficult because not everyone has the same, for example, social media platforms, and not everyone has the time to be talking to other people while they're doing homework usually. And so that part is a bit difficult, and it probably will still be until after we finish filming.
Yeah. So I think, and Na is right. We had some similar issues at the start, but also the main thing that's sort of difficult is finding time to film and do what you want to do as a group, because we're a very large group. Like, each group has around 6 members. So nobody has really ever done a project at this scale before. I mean, usually we've only ever done 2 or 3 members or something like that. So now that it's 6, it's really difficult to get everyone. For example, if you need to film a shot at the lake after school, it's really difficult to get all 6 people who have very different schedules, after school activities, other duties, to get them all to come at the same time. So I think that was also a challenge for us.
And yet you need all their skills there when you're doing that, right? Yeah.
For me, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go.
A challenge that we had, and I mean, this is something that happens in all groups, is that it's never balanced, the amount of work that each individual does. Because, for example, people might not be as dedicated, but I actually found that during this project, I was really surprised because, for example, people who I thought wouldn't be so dedicated to the project, they really surprised me. But also, we have to find ways to encourage them and find ways to communicate to them in a way that they'll understand their job and that they will take control for their specific guild.
So I think the large umbrella you've been talking about is task and time management. And again, I know that's incredibly powerful, and most professionals still have the same challenges. So it very much resonates. What about the ideas that you wanted to make come to light? What were some of the like a creative insights or something that you were super excited about because you had an opportunity to play out an idea, whether it was just sketching it out or you started to see it come alive in part of your filming?
Well, I think when we first came up with the idea for the films, a lot of us were sort of clueless at first. We're like, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? But then as we roll along, we started to come up with a concept, a basic concept. We started to build off of that. And I think that's when everyone started to have epiphanies and everyone started to go, oh, I have an idea for this. I have an idea for that. And as a screenwriter, when writing the script, at some points, I was really, really satisfied with what I've done. I just couldn't wait to share it with everybody else. And at that point, you get so excited that you don't even want to share it because it's too much for you, and then it might be too much for them. But when coming up with an idea, even though you're unsure at first. In the end, when you actually do come up with it, it's a really great feeling, and getting to share it with other people can be overwhelming at times, but it can also be very, very exciting.
Yeah, so for us, for example, we were also, just like Nal said, we were a bit confused, weren't sure where this film was really going, how we wanted to portray. I think things really sort of like clicked when we decided upon a theme for the film, like a theme as in like a literary theme. For us, it's a theme of balance, and other groups have different things. But once you have a theme like that, then suddenly you think, oh, this is how we can portray that theme here. This is how we can show an example of that here. So
Lovely.
Yeah, and to add to that, along the way, there's many moments where things might not work out with the ideas you originally planned out. So there has to be compromises as well, but everyone tries together to find a way that could add to the story in a way. And for example, if you don't have enough time to film a full length of a long scene, you have to cut it down, try to link that to other parts of the story. And yeah, so everyone has to show their creativity in that section.
Yeah, for my roles, when I really started to be like, oh, it's actually starting to click, is after we film. For example, we're done with 2 scenes and they're currently filming one right now. And I went back and the editors had finished editing, and I went back to it and I was like, oh, the costumes are actually looking good, because when we're filming, it's always like, oh no, your collar's up, we have to fix that. Oh, there's like the makeup it's not in the right place, for example, like that. But then when I went back and looked at the scene, for example, that we're done with, it's really like, oh, the costume actually looks good. This goes well together. The prop is quite nice in the scene, and yeah.
Yeah, if I can add really quick. Personally, I feel that film is a very profound and complex medium, and one of the best things about it is it can really give an emotional connection to the audience, but not just the audience, also the people behind it. So I feel like once you really develop that emotional connection with what you've contributed to the film, that's when you really feel proud of it in a way. And that's when you can be sure that it's going to not only apply to you and your group, but also to the people watching it.
Sure. So we have a few more minutes here, and I just want to ask you, so you're coming up on the end of this unit, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just, I know that there's a lot of reflection during the process of the unit, but I'd like to ask you what it is that you are going to take away personally from everything that you've learned in this unit. How has it, what has it added to your thinking, or, how you see the world, or what is it that you are going to take away from this whole experience that is personal to you?
So I feel obviously there's the very sort of surface thing that we've learned how to make a good movie. We've learned the elements of a good movie. We've learned how to edit. We've learned what sort of shots are effective in what situations. And then, like, if you take a step back from that, there's the whole media literacy thing, with the ideas that how important it is in today's world to be accurately able to judge something, whether it be a picture or a film. And then if you look even more at the even broader picture, there's the whole idea of the teamwork that we've been really trying to emphasize throughout the project. Like, we've done a lot of reflections, like you mentioned. We've done a little activity at the start, so we get to sort of know our teammates and what their strengths are, what they maybe need some support with in the group with. So I think that's sort of the biggest thing that I've taken away from it.
The teamwork aspect. It's incredibly difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody else?
Personally, for me, the largest aspect was, of course, the teamwork. As a skill that I've definitely taken away from this is using every group member's strengths and weaknesses to the overall group's advantage, and also the skill of time management and making compromises in order for that to work. As director, finding times to shoot and locations personally it's a bit challenging at times, but working together with other group members, I feel like that's a skill I'm really going to take out of this.
Yeah. Terrific.
For me, it's once again the same thing, all teamwork, and also something that I've learned, which because I'm sort of like a control freak and like a perfectionist when it comes to projects, but I've actually found that yeah, being able to trust other people and being able to know their strengths and trust that they will do a job, and being able to take a step back and understand that my vision for the movie might not be what the rest of the group has, but that it'll be even better if I am able to take a step back, because then it's all of our visions that come together, which makes something even better. And also the whole idea of media literacy, something that I've noticed is after we were doing, so we did all the content, and then when I was watching movies, I was like, oh, that's a low angle shot. And it was really like, but it didn't only stop there, like, oh, that's a low angle shot. I was also like, oh, why is it a low angle shot? So this project, even though it's, it may seem just like a project, I think that it has changed like the way I view movies and media in general.
Oh, wonderful.
And about the group work, I just wanted to mention one last thing that really sort of surprised me was that we learned more from the sort of things we did wrong in our group work and our mistakes to say in our group work than we did from like seeing what things we were doing well at. Like we, at the start, we did a quick activity where we wrote down our strengths and like a kryptonite, like with the whole Superman analogy. So what we found was, as a group, what we found was that we actually learned a whole lot by seeing this is what we did wrong. This is what I did as an individual wrong, and this is what we could do to avoid it or make it better in the next time.
Yeah. We had a reflection checkpoint on Monday, I think it was, which was actually really nice because all the guilds got together. So all the screenwriters got together, all the editors got together, and first we had discussions as a group, and it was really nice to see that we weren't the only people being challenged and struggling, that there was also someone in another group that was struggling and facing different challenges. And yeah, we were able to give each other advice.
Yeah. No, we didn't hear from you.
Something personally that I took away from this is that being able to sort of make your expectations realistic. I have a problem where I have a tendency to have incredibly high and unrealistic expectations, especially for a project like this. I'm a person who's very into films and cinema, and I always think, oh, this is going to be perfect, it's going to work, I'm going to make this scene extremely long, and then in the end, I actually talked to my group about it, and they say that I have to cut down on some parts, and I do it, and as sad as it can be to like cut down what you've worked hard on, it's also something you have to like take out of it, that within a time constraint and within like a school environment, you have to keep in mind that your way may not always be the way for everyone. It's not going to be the right thing for the group, and that's why. And you shouldn't get upset about it. You should just learn from it and improve in a way. Learn to keep your expectations low. No, not
Thank
low.
you.
I mean that. Don't fail tests and stuff. But I mean like not low. I mean sort of realistic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Allison, do you have a final question?
I just want, I know time is of the essence. So I just want to, first of all, thank you again so much for sharing your thinking about the project. And like I said, Diane and I are always looking for projects and students like you that are engaged in a way that is exciting and fresh, but you're also doing some really challenging things using not only discrete skills like filmmaking and functioning like a designer, but also starting to think about how you're working together as a team. And so we really appreciate you sharing your thinking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.